seem to want to support with more austerity. So there is a real dividing line in that message of hope that we deliver and what's offered elsewhere. Now, in my constituency, of course, I'm facing a challenge from the Liberal Democrats, and in particular from Charlie Kennedy. And when I look at the leaflets that come out from them, they tell us that everyone knows someone that Kennedy has helped. I'll tell you who he has helped. He's helped David Cameron. He's kept him in power for the last 5 years. They also say opportunities for all. Well, let's turn that round to our advantage, because on the 7th of May, it's opportunities for the people of Scotland to remove the Labour Party, the Liberals and the Tories that have stopped power coming back to this people. So we applaud the people of Scotland. Come with us. Let's make sure that together we deliver for Scotland on May the 7th. Thank you.
That was then. This is now. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the Deputy First Minister and Finance Secretary, John Sweeney. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Your own speech is tomorrow, presumably with a fairly strong economic message. We heard from Nicola Sturgeon there arguing that Scotland could survive under fiscal autonomy, and yet put this point to you that I put to others. The Institute of Fiscal Studies saying a £7.6 billion deficit being seized upon by your opponents and your rivals.
Of course, the public finances are dominated by the discussion about deficit and the fact that the United Kingdom is running a deficit which is far in excess of what the Chancellor predicted would be the case at this stage in his own financial plans. By this moment in the Chancellor's plans, the UK should have been in surplus, and we are well away from being in surplus. So what fiscal autonomy is about, what the Institute of Fiscal Studies accepts about it, is that fiscal autonomy gives you the power and the ability to improve your economic performance by taking the steps to improve productivity, to expand innovation, to take forward greater international activity and to strengthen the Scottish economy as well. That has a beneficial effect on the public finances of Scotland.
But taking that into account, the argument of a dynamic economy, do you accept the £7.6 billion figure at face value?
Well, what I accept is the material which emerges out of the analysis that comes from government expenditure and revenues in Scotland, which came out a few weeks ago, which shows that Scotland, just like the rest of the United Kingdom, is running a deficit. But
and you accept that deficit is £7.6 billion?
Well, I accept the figures that are in government expenditure and revenues in Scotland. But what the challenge is what do we do about it? Do we resign ourselves to being part of the United Kingdom without the ability to improve our economic performance, or do we take forward the economic levers and opportunities to enable us to strengthen the economic performance of our country? And that's really at the heart of the opportunity that comes with having greater financial responsibility than we have today.
Your opponents say that because Scotland is disproportionately, just simply because of the size of the economy, disproportionately dependent upon North Sea oil, whose price has shrunk, that Scotland is not so well placed as the UK as a whole to tackle that deficit, to address those structural problems.
But if we look at it over a 10-year period, over the 10-year period in the current budget balance, the Scottish position was stronger than the rest of the UK's position. Now, historically we can look at the analysis and we can see how Scotland has fared and how over a number of years our performance is better than taking one individual year, which is what my opponents would do. And the challenge for Scotland is about how we boost and grow our economy and improve our economic performance. We're seeing the signs of how successful we've been with limited powers, because we've got a higher employment rate than the rest of the United Kingdom. We've got lower economic inactivity than the rest of the United Kingdom. So we can show how, by taking a different approach to policy, we can improve our economic performance. And what we seek through the powers of fiscal autonomy is to make sure that Scotland's got even more opportunity to take more strides forward to improve our economic performance.
Nicola Sturgeon referred in great detail and great depth to the NHS. Protect the NHS, protect it in Scotland. She was even offering, as she said, to protect it in England. And yet the IFS, again, to quote from them, say that the level of expenditure in Scotland in terms of the increase has been less than it has been for England. That falls to you, doesn't it?
Well, what the IFS analysis doesn't take into account is the investment the Scottish Government makes through the non-profit distributing Scottish Futures Trust in capital investment in the National Health Service. All of the
that
commitment
explains the gap.
and that's the difference in the IFS analysis. When you look at the commitment that we made as a government, we said that we would pass on to the health service in Scotland every single penny of resource consequential funding that we got from the NHS changes in England, and that is absolutely to the penny what we've done.
That's revenue spending, day-to-day spending, not the capital, because that's been done
different. Not to the penny, because actually I gave the National Health Service in my budget for 2015-16 more than the Barnett consequentials amounted to, and we gave the National Health Service significantly in excess of what we should have given the National Health Service, such as the strength of our commitment to ensuring we have an effective National Health Service in Scotland.
In terms of general expenditure planning, you talk about increasing the public spending by 0.5% over the next 5 years. You say that still allows the deficit to be shrunk, although not presumably to be eliminated. Your opponents say that money, that 0.5% increase in spending, would simply mean a huge increase in borrowing that Scotland and the UK couldn't afford.
Well, there is an increase in borrowing, yes, but what comes from that borrowing is increased employment, more taxpayers, more people contributing to the economy, and a general uplift in the economic performance of the country. And if we invest, and this is the problem we've got with the UK government, and the problem we've got with the Labour Party, both the Conservatives and the Labour Party, and they've also batted with the Liberals, have committed themselves to an austerity agenda. We disagree with that. We think we should be investing to grow the economy, to boost the number of taxpayers, to boost the public finances as a consequence of that investment, and to give people in Scotland hope that we are coming away from austerity and we're investing in growth. And that's the opportunity people have to vote for in the election of May the 7th.
Your opponents say that the extra borrowing involved in your proposal would mean an added interest cost for the interest alone of 7 billion quid a year. Can you afford that?
Well, what growth in the economy delivers is increases in the public finances and increases in the economic performance of the country. And yes, of course, debt has got to be serviced, but what the Treasury's own analysis shows that even on the commitments that we've made, debt comes down and the deficit comes down. So we're committed to addressing the issues of debt and the scale of the deficit. We want to do it over a longer time scale with a less aggressive pace than the Conservatives, the Labour Party and the Liberals, and we want to invest in growth in the economy. And that's how we give people opportunity and hope in Scotland, and the people of Scotland are crying out for it.
John Sweeney, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and we'll hand back to the studio now.
Brian, thank you very much. Final thought from Professor John Curtis here in the studio this afternoon. John, we do live in extraordinary times, and Nicola Sturgeon almost making promises for what a UK government might be carrying out. She had that appeal to the people of a progressive nature south of the border. How do you think that appeal might go down to them?
Well, I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, will this appeal help to ensure that the Labour Party's vote remains more or less where it is in England and Wales? Because the truth is, the SNP's hopes of holding the balance of power at Westminster and being able to put Ed Miliband into office and to be his backbone, as she put it, does indeed rest on the Labour Party not losing ground south of the border during the course of the next 6 weeks. And I think the difficulty she's perhaps got there is that, the people who might be concerned about the prospect of the SNP, the people who might say, well, hang on, why is the Scottish tail wagging the English dog, are probably, if anything, probably more to the right of Ed Miliband than they are to the left of Ed Miliband. And therefore, it's not entirely clear to me that her argument will necessarily perhaps ensure that those people who are thinking that, whether I'm going to vote Conservative or vote Labour, what am I going to do, that this is necessarily going to be something that helps to ensure that they remain in Ed Miliband's camp. Equally also, by the way, insofar as she's standing very much on an anti-Westminster platform, this was almost, as it were, echoes of UKIP here. One of the distinguishing characteristics of UKIP supporters south of the border is a great deal of distrust about government. And again, whether or not her message is necessarily going to ensure that people stay with the Labour Party south of the border, I'm not entirely sure about. And it's something we need to be aware. The SNP may feel self-confident about their own abilities to win up here, but in the end, they are very dependent on Labour being able to do well enough in England and Wales to deny the Tories a majority, but not so well, of course, that they end up getting a majority themselves.
And John, just briefly, as well, as Nicola Sturgeon makes that appeal to people south of the border today very clearly in her speech, also an appeal to people who voted no in the referendum, just trying to reach out to everyone.
Indeed, I think perhaps one of my guys is right remarkable that a political party that's already got somewhere around 46, 47% of the vote, according to the polls, apparently thinks it needs to reach out more widely. Now, of course, one of the things that we do know from the polls is actually, for the most part, the current level of SNP support is primarily embedded in those who voted yes in the referendum. Around 80% of those people who voted yes in the referendum are now saying they're going to vote for the SNP, and only around 10% of those who voted no. She apparently, in a sense, is now wanting to kind of break down that dividing line and trying to reach out across to those who are no supporters. It looks very, very ambitious for a party that's already so high. One wonders whether she needs to do so, given how well they're doing, but apparently are feeling that, yes, we would like to be able to reach across to no supporters. Whether she'll succeed, I'm not sure, but certainly no limit to her ambitious in saying all of this.
John, thank you very much for all your contributions this afternoon. Let's head back to the conference for some more reaction there for a final time too. Brian's been joined by another couple of guests. Brian.
Thanks very much indeed. I was going to say it's quietened down a little bit in the hall behind me. It still hasn't. It seems to be giving a standing ovation to anybody just standing up to speak at all. Joined by two journalistic colleagues, Lindsay McIntosh, Libby Brooks. Thanks both very much indeed. Simple question to each of you. What did you make of Nicola Sturgeon's speech? Lindsay first.
I thought the delivery was pretty outstanding. I mean, she really is the most impressive performer in the UK at the moment, I would say, in the political scene. You know, she's just a consummate professional, and the practice that she's had over the last couple of years really shows. I think in terms of content, however, there was a number of interesting things in there. First was interesting by its omission, very little for business in there.
Which is interesting, given that her first statement in her party conference speech last autumn and her first actual speech in Glasgow on the stump was about the need to boost business as well.